Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
Welcome to State of State, Penn State football show presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Penn State falls by a score of 42-37 against UCLA. As you can imagine, the circumstances watching this game live, this throws you off by a little bit. So Penn State came into this game 3-1, coming off of a heartbreaking loss against Oregon. You're going up against an 0-4 UCLA team that has fired its head coach, that has fired its defensive coordinator, whose offensive coordinator resigned earlier on this week. And you drop this one on the road. I don't even know how to dive into this one. So, Justin, do you have any opening thoughts here?
That wasn't good.
No, not really.
That wasn't good on any fronts, man. They didn't seem inspired. They didn't seem to play tough. They didn't seem to be competitive. They didn't seem to embody any of the values that we kind of bank on. It didn't, again, just at the core basis of just physicality. I feel like UCLA was more physical. I mean, running the football, whether it was with the RPO. Towards late in the game, there was some sparks of some recoil and contact for Penn State, but I was just kind of dumbfounded and disappointed by the showing on the West Coast.
From the beginning, it just appeared that from a body language standpoint, neither side of the ball seemed to be terribly invested in the game. UCLA, to their credit, came out firing in this game. They came out with the opening score, nice long drive. They go for the onside kick, and they get it, and they saw a gap on tape that they thought they could take advantage of, and they did, and they turned it into 2 scores pretty quickly, and they just jumped out on Penn State. They started fast in the way that James Franklin always likes to say that Penn State should start fast, and you just never saw that from Penn State in this game. Credit to UCLA and Jerry Neuheisel, who was highlighted extensively throughout this game by CBS. Obviously, Rick Neuheisel, his father, former head coach at UCLA, was on the broadcast for CBS Sports from the studio. So touching father and son moment, but at the same time, you have a first-time play caller just running circles around your defense. Justin, for me, I'll start with UCLA's offense up against Penn State's defense, and there's a lot we have to get into here. It just seemed like Penn State's front four did not come to play, flat out. It didn't seem like a situation where UCLA had better athletes. It just seemed like a situation where Denida Sutton was very undisciplined throughout this game. Zane Durant, for all of his efforts, also called for a late offsides penalty that was backbreaking for Penn State. Just about everybody else on the defensive line for Penn State, thanks for showing up. Didn't even really make much of a difference. The running game for UCLA was absolutely incredible in this game. Where do you want to start with the Penn State defense?
I don't even know, man. Because it's one thing to give up yards. It's one thing to not play good up front, but just a lack of physicality all over. I mean, against a West Coast team like UCLA and their powder blue stuff, it hurts my heart to see that they were like moving the football the way that they were and playing with a level of physicality that they were. And I mean, we showed up every couple minutes. I mean, DDS has a couple plays nice at the end. There's some nice stops where these guys showed up a little bit too late. It's just, I don't know if it was the RPO attack where they had to be a little bit more disciplined and make sure that they stayed on their keys and stay within their gaps and not just kind of rush with their ears pinned back. I'm not necessarily sure what happened, but we made Nico look like he was worth the $3 million he should have got from Tennessee. I'll tell you.
Oh, yeah.
From running the football, though.
Yeah. Question here: what happened to the defensive line? There was no pressure all game. To that point, even when Jim Knowles attempted to bring 5, 6, rushing a safety from Justin, 15 yards out, just didn't seem to matter. You saw when Penn State made adjustments in the second half as they went more to a man look that they were able to slow up the passing game a little bit by UCLA, and that I think it was clear from the outset of this game, before this game even kicked off, that Penn State had better athletes in the secondary than UCLA. So you understood, like, hey, man-to-man, Penn State should be able to have a lot of success. But they came out in zone. They're giving pretty deep cushions to UCLA's pass catchers, and that was essentially what Oregon took advantage of last week with Dante Moore. And Nico Iamaleava and company took advantage of that, so credit to them. The ball was out in 2 seconds most of the game. So even when Jim Knowles attempted to bring pressure, really didn't seem to matter. What did you see?
I mean, they were playing behind the 8 ball the whole day, right? So, like, I mean, playing behind the 8 ball, it didn't really seem like anything that they were doing was working much when they can get 7-8 yards a clip. Nico could take off on an RPO for 60 yards every once in a while. Guys aren't wrapping it up and tackling, getting blown off the football, not playing sound defense. I mean, guys on the outside giving free releases. When they do decide to go man, then you get some passes, some deep passes and explosive giving up. I just think it was a uniformed poo-poo effort.
Across the board.
Yeah, across the board.
It was absolutely terrible. Nico Iamaleava finishes 17-24, only 166 yards passing, two touchdowns, 71% completion percentage, as I mentioned. In the second half, Penn State was able to limit UCLA in the passing game. So, there's a minor silver lining there, but at least rushing the football, Nico Iamaleava setting a career-high 16 carries for 128 yards rushing, 8 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. So he finishes with 5 total touchdowns. At the end of this, UCLA 269 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 5.1 yards per carry. Justin, it just seemed like no matter what Penn State was putting out there defensively, and this was even after you saw, was it Dom DeLuca got hurt? He came in and out of the lineup, and you and I didn't get to talk about this earlier on in the week, the loss of Tony Rojas to a long-term injury, obviously substantial for Penn State's defense, but I did not think it to be as substantial as it proved to be in this game against UCLA. And that Amari Campbell was playing his tail off, but at the same time, it just seemed like a given that a UCLA rusher, whether it be Nico or Anthony Woods, it didn't really matter, was going to get to the second level, was going to get minimum 5 yards per carry. And then the tackling throughout this game, for the life of me, I would love some sort of explanation as to why Penn State has not figured out how to tackle effectively into this point in the season. What were you seeing?
Yeah, the tackling, again, that's a head scratcher because, they've been playing such high-level defense all the season, and it hasn't shown that that they would lack physicality in just simple tackling. I think that's something that I've taken for granted when I watch the Penn State football teams, that they want to do the simple things right. So when you don't do that or don't do those things, you have bad outcomes. I'm kind of a loss for words.
Oh, buddy, I don't blame you. Hop into the comments section here. Justin, what is your read on the locker room and faith in Franklin moving forward? Consistently, when they shot him on the sideline, Justin, it looked like James Franklin was as stunned as the rest of us. And there were a lot of things from a play calling standpoint on offense with Andy Kotelnicki, and we'll get into that more with Penn State's offense up against UCLA's defense here in a moment. But just, it did not feel like a team that was fighting throughout this game.
No, I didn't get a sense of an inspired team or a team that was trying to bounce back from a loss last week. I did not get that feel. It's unfortunate because you don't want to see that from a team being coached. That's not a good sign anywhere. And yeah, it looked like they didn't care at the beginning of the game. Both sides of football. Just to say the least.
It looked like every phase of the game, I was at least encouraged by that in the second half when you saw the block punt by Denida Sutton, who struggled mightily in this game, and you saw the touchdown score there by Liam Clifford. I was like, all right, this team's not quitting, at least. I didn't see a team quit. I just didn't see a team in Penn State that was horribly invested in this. And I know you're a big believer and understanding person when it comes to, hey, if your team is East Coast and you're traveling out West Coast, the time change, all those things that come with that, it can be a challenge. But you can understand a slow start, but a team that you were favored to beat by 24.5 points, according to FanDuel, it's just.
Yeah, 28 points is tough, man. And like you said, you got guys that came back and really built up this season for a national championship run. And so when you don't have those outcomes, or hell, week 5, and it seems like what you came back for is no longer on the table, that becomes a pretty tough thing to keep the locker room together for, if that's the leadership in the locker room, because this is a more individualistic type of ecosystem in college sports. And I think the team aspect and coming together, that only works when you're winning. When you're losing, it's like every man for themselves. I mean, that's like everybody run for cover. So this is going to be an interesting one to see how these coaches pull this one back. But I think it could get ugly, honestly, if it's not reined in.
Question here from Melinda: was the UCLA quarterback just a really fast sprinter? Here's the truth about Nico Iamaleava. If you don't know his story, he spent the last few years at Tennessee, was one of the biggest stories of the offseason, and somebody who tried to leverage his way into more money from the University of Tennessee. Ultimately, Josh Heupel and company declined to pay what he and his camp were asking for. He transfers to UCLA. Nico is from the Los Angeles area. So I was shocked that when you saw Deshaun Foster, the former head coach of UCLA, fired, that Nico wasn't the first guy in the transfer portal, but he stayed, to his credit. Nico has always been a very athletic guy, but has been more of a dude who wants to sit in the pocket and he can extend the play. But for him to embrace the ability of his game, where he is obviously a talented rusher, he's a very talented athlete. So be able to put up nearly 300 yards of total offense, it's not something that people looked at Nico and said, oh, that's not his game, he can't do that. It's like, no, he's completely capable of doing that. You just have to build the offense around that. And I think that's what UCLA has attempted to do earlier on this season, but obviously to very little success. And to the credit of Jerry Neuheisel, first-time play caller for UCLA, they took advantage of that. And this is something James Franklin talked about earlier on this week. He said that in his conversations with Andy Frank, they have perhaps never come across a situation where you saw this much turnover within a coaching staff and then having to go up against a team like this in early October. Like, this is a very new situation in the grand scheme of college football, but it just doesn't necessarily create an excuse. I want to get into some more of the questions and just overall comments here, Justin, because as you can imagine, people are just upset. I never liked Andy Kotelnicki's offense. He's trying to be the smartest man in the room, and it don't work versus a smart defensive coordinator. Maddie, to your point, I don't know if it's something where Andy Kotelnicki's trying to be the smartest guy in the room. I think he's trying to confuse you as much as humanly possible with a lot of pre-snap motion, where he's trying to get you to identify early on what your defensive set is. But Justin, you would understand this far better than I, as somebody who's played on the defensive side of the ball, is that UCLA just did not show a lot whenever you saw those shifts from Andy Kotelnicki in a variety of different sets. That just, there really wasn't a lot that UCLA wasn't prepared for in this game.
No, and a lot of the trickery and the motions or misdirections really go null and void when you just punch somebody in the mouth. And I think that's what UCLA was doing at the end of the day. They were playing a physical brand of football, and once you stop the run game and you don't really get anything moving, you kind of tee off on, the offense. And that's essentially what happened. I just, like, all that stuff goes out the window. They were a more physical football team, like, throughout the game. And that's, you can't expect that. And I don't think there's a fix for that. That's an attitude. That's not a skill thing. Like, we have all the skill, but not enough trill. When I say that, I mean like real trill, like toughness, like, you know what I mean? And that's just what had to show up when you're talking about doing the trickery and all those different type of things. It seemed like UCLA came out with a different level of energy on the offense and defense side of the football.
All of the things that you and I talked about during the offseason that were legitimate concerns, I think, for this Penn State defense. Depth at defensive end beyond Denai Dennis Sutton. Depth at defensive tackle beyond Zane Durant. Depth at linebacker. All of those things got exposed today against UCLA. And granted, you lost Tony Rojas earlier on this week. You lost Dom DeLuca at certain points during this game. You lost the depth of the defensive tackle room. It's just a horrible game by the defensive line in general. But this just seemed like a defense that wasn't really committed to stopping the run. And then you had a situation where the defensive ends really weren't creating any pass rush. Denai Dennis Sutton did not play a disciplined game. But just about every sort of situation that could have been exploited with this Penn State defense was exploited by UCLA. And you also had a situation, and as someone who played defensive back, perhaps you can shed some light on this. It looked like Zakee Wheatley was forced to play middle linebacker for much of this game. You could feel Jim Knowles bringing the secondary up closer and closer. And you also saw during this game, and we have a question here from Maddie just saying, does Penn State have the right players for a Knowles defense? Perhaps you can shed some light on that.
I mean, after this game, it doesn't seem like it. I think you can question everything after a performance like this. But I believe up until last week, we thought there was a championship level defense. But again, that was them showing the level of speed and physicality to play. There's no fixing, or there's not a right call for guys getting ran through, not wrapping up and doing all the right things against the RPO, because that's what those offenses are forced to do, is to get the secondary. They come in and make hard tackles, or make sure that, you got guys that are undisciplined in football. But if you're not physical and play with a level of attitude, I don't care what you call. You know what I mean? So, up until last week, I thought it was the right players. So if the right players don't play physical and with a level of attitude, they'll never be the right players.
Mm-hmm. State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
Let's flip to the offensive side of the ball for Penn State in this game. I think Drew Auer is going to catch a lot of flack, but I've been pretty hard on Drew Auer for the last few weeks, Justin, and I don't pin all of this on Drew Auer. This is a collective collapse. 19 of 26, 200 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 73% completion percentage. Drew Auer was the leading rusher for Penn State football. 11 carries, 78 yards, a long of 27, average of 7.1 yards per carry. At the end of the day, Penn State finished 157 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, 5.1 yards per carry. So it wasn't a situation where you were having a lack of success with Katron Allen. I would say you were having a lack of success with Nick Singleton. So one, it's frustrating that Penn State did not learn its lesson from the Oregon game, and that you still stuck to Nick Singleton and you tried to force him on the UCLA defense. And at the same time, you saw a situation where Katron Allen had his success, but you got into a situation where you couldn't afford to just play methodical football, drop back, run ball, play time of possession, all that sort of stuff. It just wasn't there. This is a better pass catching group than it was last year, but it's not by a lot. I mean, it was like you had an A+ last year in Tyler Warren, and then you had a lot of guys who are like B-. It feels like a lot of B's, B+ across the board. So it's just a little bit more even. But man, very few guys really creating any sort of separation in time to give Drew Auer opportunities to make in-rhythm throws. And that's what we talked about so much coming out of the Oregon game into this game. And I know you talked about it, is Andy Kotelnicki had to find a way for Drew Auer to get in rhythm. It just never happened in this. What were you seeing?
I mean, again, they were playing from behind from the beginning of the game. I think just starting off with the onside kick and essentially going down 2 possessions before they get on the field. I mean, now there's no chance of finding a rhythm, right? And I think from that standpoint, that's when they're just off beat from the jump. And like you said, Drew might take some slack here, but I think there's some to do with the offensive coordinator. I think there's a little bit to do with Drew. I think there's a little bit of blame to go around to everybody. But it has to get figured out if there's any type of redemption to this season.
What's your observation with Andy Kotelnicki at this point as play caller?
I mean, we got to figure out identity. Can't be gimmicky. I mean, I think that's kind of been the stance from jump. Right now, I guess you can go back from the points per game. I guess you can go from a positive standpoint, but from just how it looks from in-game experience, I mean, we need to lean on or find whatever our bread and butter is and kind of build an identity from that and not make everything a Rubik's Cube, it seems like, and again, rhythm. It doesn't seem like we put a lot of emphasis on that. It just kind of spot plays and just kind of doing things.
I agree with you in terms of things being too cute. Now, something we talked about middle of last season is this seemed like an offense that was built on bells and whistles. It was built on a lot of pre-snap motion, trying to get the defense to show its hand early. And if you stand fast as a defense and you don't give up those things, you're going to be okay against an Andy Kotelnicki offense, which is unfortunate to say. And again, this is coming off of his 10 years at Buffalo, his tenure at Kansas, where you're playing against inferior competition. You're going to have inferior talent for the most part, and you're trying to outsmart or play a game that is more disciplined than the opponent. So when you're playing at this level, and again, I'll be the first person to say this is the worst team in Power 4 that Penn State just lost to. So there's really no apologizing for this loss for Penn State against UCLA on the road, where they had next to no fans in the stands. It was just humiliating on a lot of levels. But you're sitting there looking at the way that this offense is still trying to conduct itself through the game, some of the philosophies and strategies it sticks with, and it's just not working. It's just not there. And it just doesn't feel like this is an offense that really believes in what it's doing. And I don't know. I would love your thoughts on this in terms of Drew Aller. We talked about it. There's been the Hackenberg comparison that I've made, and sometimes that's been harsh. I think he has more physical gifts than a Christian Hackenberg, but it still feels eerily reminiscent of Hackenberg in that it was a square peg in a round hole. And that's been identified at the national level, but I do think it's very true for us talking about people who cover this team and watch this team day in and day out, is that you have a traditional pocket passer who, thank God, Drew Aller is able to be mobile within the pocket and able to extend plays, because otherwise Penn State had no chance offensively in this game. So Drew Aller, not single-handedly, but did a tremendous job keeping Penn State in this game. But you're looking at a situation where it's like this offense is not tailor-made for someone with Drew Aller's skill set. And at the same time, Drew Aller just doesn't seem to be grasping the concepts that Andy Kotelnicki wants to execute. And I think from an emotional and mental maturity standpoint, Drew Aller's not there. And this is his last season with Penn State. And at this point in time, Penn State's going to need to win out if they want to see something other than an okay bowl game in the postseason. So I don't know what you take away from Drew Aller on this one. I don't put it all on him, but man, I think he fought. I think he put a lot of things together from a passing standpoint. It's difficult to fault him. Held on to the ball for a while, mostly because he had to. Nobody was getting open. Offensive line was still allowing the pass rush to get through, and this was not an elite UCLA pass rush. There's a lot of things wrong with this, Justin. I really don't know where you begin to fix this.
I mean, there's enough blame to go around. I think you're right. Drew takes a lot of the heat because he's the guy on the field. But I mean, like you said, whether it's a lack of separation from the receivers, a lack of consistency in the play calling or rhythm, or just help from the coaches in terms of putting them in a position to succeed, right? Like you said, if he's not an RPO type of guy and he's running an RPO or running jet sweeps and throwing things of that nature in critical moments of the game, when he's more of your pro-style quarterback that sits back, makes his reads, and delivers the football, and that's not necessarily Coach K's offense. So I think you hit it right on the spot where it might not be the best match in skill set to offensive philosophy, and then trying to build around it to make it go because you have all the other pieces in place to make a championship run. And it's unfortunate that it looks the way it does, and it really looks bad when the defense doesn't come to play, and it just shows how things can get out of hand.
Question here. Are the expectations Penn State isn't having fun out there? Is it the expectations that has them overthinking so much? What do you think?
I hope not. I mean, this is what they signed up for, and this is what they said. A lot of those guys put the expectations on themselves, right? When they decided to come back and things of that nature. And I don't really have too much empathy because the guys are getting paid nowadays, right? In the sense of this is what they're getting paid to do. So I don't think the expectations are making them think too much. It's a matter of executing when you have expectations, if there's anything in that vein. But guys got to compete and execute, but they did not play with the emotional or competitive fortitude that you would like to see from a Penn State football team today.
No. Man, it's just looking at this in general. Time of possession. UCLA possessed the ball for 39 minutes, 10 seconds. Penn State for 20 minutes, 50 seconds. Just offensively, Penn State barely found the time offensively to even get on the field to have any sort of effect on this. And Penn State's defense just could not come up with any sort of answers, especially for the QB run. So credit to UCLA, what they were able to do in this game. Point here from one of our followers. I've never said fire Franklin until now. That was 100% on the coaches. I don't blame the players. Pathetic play calling, horrendous clock management, and no fighting attitude. Embarrassing. Hard to differ with that. This was a game that was absolutely winnable for Penn State football. Out of its remaining games on the schedule, this felt like a layup for Penn State. I've heard the proverbial trap game, and James Franklin talks about it all the time, not allowing one bad play turn into two bad plays, one loss, one bad game to turn into two bad games. Penn State let that happen. So you're in a situation where you just dropped your second game of the season. It's now October 4th. Penn State can't lose another game this season if they want to make the college football playoff. I think I'll hear the arguments of, Penn State could finish 9-3 and still be kind of like teetering on the edge. But if you absolutely want to make the college football playoff and have the chance to contend for a national championship, not credibly contend for the national championship, because I'm throwing that verbiage out the window, because I do not believe Penn State can credibly contend for the national championship anymore after the last 2 weeks. I don't think you can make that argument. I think you can look at what Penn State is and say, yeah, they can make the playoff and they can play against somebody in the first round and hope that that's an inferior opponent and maybe make your way out of that one. But that's a maybe at this point. And I just don't see a situation unless there's a cataclysmic turnaround for Penn State football, some gargantuan turnaround that all of a sudden helps you win out the rest of the way, and especially go on the road to beat Ohio State and beat Indiana, a good Indiana football team, in your house on November 8th. This is just like, not to be like doom and gloom, but this was your get right game and you blew it.
Yeah, they let the Oregon game seep into the second one. They said 42 games without Penn State, losing back-to-back games, and it was broken today. So this is, out of character for the program, and they better get it fixed because a lot of riding on this year.
Questioning from Chris: is it mental health? Is it the coaching, bad play calling, the refs? Literally a loss here. Oregon in double overtime. I can't understand it, but this is our season over, because right now I think it is.
If those guys don't come out and perform better than they did today, it's over. Yes, you're right.
And it's something we talked about earlier on this week. We did a whole episode assessing James Franklin, and it's something I've talked about extensively, and I hope people understand it. As of right now, until January 1st, James Franklin's buyout is roughly $56 million. On January 1st, it drops to $48 million. And then you deduct $8.5 million annually until his contract ends in 2031. If I'm a Penn State fan, you are upset. I completely understand that. I'm ticked off as well. Here's the hard truth of the matter. This is not a football program and athletics department that is flush with cash. So that big of a number, this is not a Jimbo Fisher situation like a Texas A&M where they are just like, yep, roughly $80 million, get out of here. That is not the situation with Penn State. His buyout becomes more friendly in the next handful of years. What you should be worried about is if Neely Bendapudi and Pat Kraft give him an extension at any point in time, at the end of this year and sometime in the near future. If you are a reasonable person, Neely Bendapudi and Pat Kraft, you look at what he's doing and you have to start thinking very critically about it and say, we're not giving you another extension, period. Your deal expires in 2031. You have to do something in that time. Every possible resource has been given to James Franklin and Penn State football to be successful. And that's all Penn State athletics across the board. It's unbelievable the amount of sports that Penn State has either winning national championships or credibly contending for national championships. And the money that Penn State football is going to realize from a budgeting standpoint, you're not really going to completely comprehend on your books for another couple of years. That's just how businesses work. So you're in a situation where you better hope that Penn State doesn't think that James Franklin's doing a tremendous job and extend him beyond 2031, because this is atrocious. From your experience, Justin, how much of this do you blame on coaching?
I think anytime the team doesn't bounce back from an emotional standpoint, you got to look to the coaching a little bit, right? Especially when the guys don't play inspired. Have a little bit more empathy or have a little bit more grace when it's like play calls, it's philosophies, and things don't work from an execution standpoint, making mistakes at 100 miles per hour. But guys playing uninspired and just the lack of rhythm on offense and lack of physicality on defense. I mean, that's, you have to point to the architecture of what's going on, but it's hard to make a pure indictment off the one slip, right? When we always talk about, I think we've always taken for granted us beating the teams we're supposed to beat. So it's like one of the first times we lost to a team where we're not supposed to lose to. And this is like, some of the things we used to speak on of taking the wins that we do get. But at this point, I mean, something does have to shake in terms of the way that they played, because it wasn't like they played hard and UCLA came out and battled. It was UCLA came out and kicked their butts, and it shouldn't have been that close.
I'm very curious to hear what James Franklin has to say in his post-game press conference. I'd be very, very curious to hear how he gets this. You get it. I hope you get it now. We'll have more on that later on this week as we preview Penn State's return home. They'll be playing Northwestern this next coming week, which again is an extremely winnable opponent. But after this type of performance, you take absolutely nothing for granted. The number 7 Penn State Nittany Lions fall on the road by a score of 42-37 to a winless UCLA team in Los Angeles. Thank you for tuning in here live. Like, comment, subscribe, rate us, turn on notifications. If you haven't done so already, become a member of our YouTube channel. You can get all of our past and upcoming episodes ad-free for just 99 cents a month. You can get all of our episodes commercial-free. Follow the link in the description of this podcast. He's Justin King. I'm Tom Hannafin. Again, your final score from Pasadena: UCLA 42, the number 7 Penn State Nittany Lions 37. Thank you for joining us here on State of State, a Penn State football show presented by FanDuel.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by FanDuel.